We are back. I'm Atul Singh, the founder, CEO, and editor in chief of Fair Observer. With me is General BK Sharma, the Director General of the United Service Institution of India, India's oldest defense think tank. I think it dates back to 1870, does it, sir?
Yes, of course.
Brilliant. So, you've been around for a while, to say the least, and you do a whole load of stuff. But we are not going to discuss in detail what Fair Observer does or what USI does. We had a fantastic conversation last time about the Russia-Ukraine war. And in the course of the war, we ended up touching upon what's going on in India. And India faces a renewed threat from Pakistan. We know from what's happening in Jammu. In fact, our good sir here is from that part of the world itself. His family hails from Doda, Bhadarwa region.
Yes.
Bhadarwa region. And so he has a lot of insight. And it is not just a renewed threat from Pakistan that we face. We also have a 3,500 kilometer border with China, and they aren't exactly cuddly panda bears. And we know that they are colluding with Pakistan. So we face a rough neighborhood. India has a tough job to maintain its security in a rough neighborhood. And without further ado, General Sharma, paint us a picture of what is going on both borders.
Thank you, Atulji. I'll begin with the spurt of terrorism in Jammu region. Now, we should have understood one thing, that no matter in what state Pakistan is, its intent and its design to destabilize India will never evaporate in times to come. And we had some good.
It's in their DNA.
It's in their DNA. This chronic hostility is going to persist, and we should not have any illusions about it. Now, what had happened that post abrogation of Article 370, there have been some positive developments which have come in Kashmir Valley. People have reconciled to the idea of living in a new normal in a post Article 370 abrogation world, and that is evident from the fact that more than about 52% voter turnout was there for parliamentary elections. There were more than about 25% people who came up as candidates to participate in the elections. The voter turnout in Jammu was about 70%, and in the area of Ladakh Union Territory was about 72%. And there is a lot of enthusiasm now for the assembly elections. But one of the main factor for this kind of a environment is that we've been able to manage our counter-terrorism grid exceptionally well there, which is multi-layered, which is very dense. We've been able to disrupt the terror ecosystem, terror financing, and utilize the overground workers to a large extent. But this was at the cost.
So just to intrude, overground workers are those Kashmiris who often do not break the law or even sometimes skirt the law, but they sympathize with insurgency. Some of them want independence, some even want union with Pakistan. So I just wanted to explain what that means. Please crack on.
Absolutely. Now, what happened that because there were about 2 decades of relative peace in Jammu, so we started building up an assumption that Jammu region has become incident free, and we weakened up our counter-terrorism grid there. That also affected the intelligence grid, because if your CT grid is not there on ground, your public engagement stops and contact intelligence dries up, then everything else, there is that the flow of information intelligence also gets affected.
Just very quickly, I have been told by young officers that there's a lot of true movement away from that sector towards the line of actual control,
Yeah,
and that weakened the
yeah.
hold of the military.
So this was on the premise that Jammu is incident free. Therefore, because of Galwan and post Galwan, they thought that well they could afford to relocate some of the Rashtriya Rifle units from Jammu region and deploy them in eastern Ladakh. Now that created a vacuum. Even if that was something important, but we in the interim were not able to train, equip, and enculturize our central armed police forces to operate in a counterterrorism kind of an environment. They were mostly static, inert, and because of the electioning, some weaknesses did crop up on the very first year of infiltration grid, that is along the IB, because the terrain itself is, it cannot be a foolproof kind of a counter infiltration scenario.
And IB is international boundary
IB is
for
international
our
boundary.
viewers and listeners.
Yeah, from Jammu region right up to Punjab. So that area was exploited, whether it was by virtue of making certain tunnels, whether it was using drones for the drugs, which is a major source of narco terrorism, whether it was to drop certain weapons. And all these conduits Pakistan was able to open and infiltrate and go into Jammu hinterland and into the depth areas. Now, the second factor which got combined with this was the demography. You know, by and large in Jammu region, particularly Poonch and Rajouri and upper reaches of Punjab, Chenab, you know, uh, Rajouri Poonch, which is south of Pir Panjal, is predominantly Muslim. There are two communities there. One is Gujar Bakarwal and second is Rajput. And in Bhadrawa, the demographic proportion is about 48% or Hindus and about 52% of Muslims. And there is a communal polarization, and in the past we have witnessed some very ugly, communal riots in those areas. And all the heights in the upper reaches are about 14,000 and above, where there are these caves and hideouts and things like that. So these people were able to go and sort of hide themselves there, and then they started these operations. Now, what has happened this time?
Very quickly, young officers say that, sir, they are following a completely new style of functioning. They are not leaving any digital fingerprint. So they're not using cell phones. They just go silent. They embed themselves in villages, and then they strike, and then they go silent again.
See, the brand of terrorists that we have seen this time, they have been trained by Pakistan's special forces in guerrilla warfare.
I see.
Right? And they are equipped with M4 rifles with steel core bullets which can penetrate body armor. They also have encrypted equipment which we have not been able to decipher. Right? Whatever communications they make, I think there's some Chinese kind of chips in them, and sometimes they're even using mobile communication, but we can't intercept anything. But this time they are not embedding themselves in civil population. They stay away into far-flung areas.
So they stay in forests.
Forests and in the hideouts, and there is sort of this overground network, which in a very innocuous way, they are giving them the logistic sustenance. Then if you look at the entire geography of Poonch, Rajouri and Chenab belt, the area per se gives them a flexibility to conduct operations in parts of, what you call is Kathua, Pathankot. On the other side, Chamba region, then Bhadrawa, Udhampur, and the areas north of Chenab river which are adjacent to Anantnag district. So it gives the area, the strategic location of Jammu and this south of Pir Panjal and Chenab belt is such that it can give them multiple options.
Correct.
And as
geography is very useful.
As per some estimates, what has happened, there are about 6 to 7 groups which are operating, and they are following that hit and run tactics, and we have seen that they have been able to inflict casualties on us, whereas we have not been able to neutralize any of this.
We lost a para commando, Captain Shubham Gupta,
yes,
correct?
Yes,
9
absolutely,
paras.
absolutely. So that, and plus very recently we lost 2 more officers in Doda region. So this is a big challenge, but now what has happened that it goes to the credit of Indian Army that they've been able to mobilize in a very big way, and special operation group of police, and we've inducted, as per media reports, about 3,000 troops there, as also some para special forces. And you would have seen in the recent past there has not been any incident. And it is my belief, having been involved in counter-terrorism operations, it is just a matter of time that we will be able to nab and neutralize these. But again, we should not go through another phase of complacency. Having restored the situation there, seen successful election, we need to look at certain permanent solutions. And the major factor here is that army cannot get involved in perpetuity in counter-terrorism operations because of this two-front scenario. We have to enable our central armed police forces and the local police in terms of training and equipping, so that they are able to take care of internal security.
Understood. And that will need a lot of reform, some of them very painful, but that's a separate discussion.
Yeah, absolutely.
We can have, we'll have that discussion on central police forces and intelligence, because I have a lot to say about it.
Yeah.
And I've seen it from the inside. But let's go back to the element of collusion between Pakistan and China. After all, the drones that the Pakistanis are using to ferry drugs, to ferry weapons across the border, are of Chinese make, maybe of Turkish make from time to time, and at the same time, so is the money coming in to Pakistan from China. Pakistan has gone to the IMF now n number of times. It is fundamentally broke. And some people view this as a great opportunity for India. And I say, well, maybe not, because a broke Pakistan means that the jihadis have become cheap. Hindi mein kahenge, jihadi saste ho gaye. To put it in Hindi, I've just said the jihadis have become cheap. So it's a curious situation. And China, with limited economic support to Pakistan, can run a very clever, insidious campaign against India on the cheap. So, sir, over to you. What do you think?
See, my assessment tells me that Pakistan, in its present state, is incapable of posing any major threat to India, right? They have a problem of Tehrik-e-Taliban of Pakistan, with Balochistan Liberation Movement. Also, Durand Line dilemma is hanging like an albatross around their neck, because they are not in good relations with the Taliban.
Yeah, the Pashtuns have always dreamt of a greater Pakhtunistan.
So
they've never accepted the Durand Line.
So Pashtun Tahaffuz movement and all this.
Yeah.
Now, these are the problems. But then Pakistan, as you said, it is in their DNA to fish in troubled waters. They are still giving us those provocations in terms of, some bat actions, which is, launching some attacks against our isolated posts and whipping up this militancy. But where Pakistan can be a big nuisance, should our line of actual control, where Chinese are breathing down our neck, if it gets activated and our whole attention gets riveted to deal with China, Pakistan can seize that window of opportunity and can create problems for us. It can again activate the line of actual control. And this collusivity can manifest mostly in the Ladakh region, where on one side we have at the LAC Chinese, and on the other side, in the area of Turtuk, Gilgit-Baltistan, you have Pakistanis.
Yeah.
So that is where their politico-military objectives coalesce, and they can create a problem. But India is ready for these kind of contingencies.
Now you say we are ready, but our defense budget is a fraction of the Chinese defense budget. Our GDP is much smaller than China. China can make stuff. China's manufacturing capacity today is greater than the US. So, my question to you is, ultimately modern war is about production of armaments. And the Chinese can produce things at industrial scale. How do we combat that?
See, today we have to contextualize Chinese threat in the overall
Yeah.
global scenario.
Yeah.
It is not in isolation, right?
Accepted.
Right? They have their own hands full and they don't look at India as a principal adversary, right? It's United States of America, which is their principal adversary. To my mind, whatever gains or whatever ascendancy they wanted to achieve at the line of actual control, they have been able to do that through the actions that they initiated around Galwan time. They made us to redeploy in a very big way. But in the meanwhile, what has happened, they've also seen Indian military's capacity to mobilize in a record time and go for a mirror imaging kind of a deployment there. So therefore, I think we are in a case, in a state of stalemate there. In the meanwhile, a very good realization has dawned upon Indian security establishment, and that is to very clearly and objectively identify the strategic capacity gap that is there between us and China. For example, they have the rocket force, right, which has got multitude of missiles. They have now this information support force, what they called is the earlier the strategic support force, which has got electronic warfare, special forces, space warfare, psychological warfare, information warfare. And they are leaders in artificial intelligence, drones, and high end technology. Now, India has taken a note of this, and we are aware that, well, there is a certain capacity gap. And this is the direction today in which the Indian armed forces are moving. That we don't have to match Chinese platform by platform, weapon by weapon. There has to be a degree, a scale at which you have to create that denial by deterrence capability. And we are almost heading in that direction, though there is a strategic capacity gap. So this is the debate that is taking place. Concurrently with this, Chinese went for a major modernization from 18 odd group armies. They were able to reduce to 5 theater commands. So even
that is a big achievement.
Big achievement. That has brought energy, integration, and synergy in there. And there is Central Military Commission which controls everything. So we are also moving in that direction, but we
at
need
a glacial pace.
But at a glacial pace. At a glacial pace.
Yeah.
So what is important that civil-military fusion, as far as our national security is concerned, having the whole of nation.
So let me push you. What do you actually mean by civil-military fusion? Because it's almost become a cliche. What do we mean by it?
See, civil-military fusion is that your politico-bureaucratic authority and your military authority.
So the politician, the IS officer, the Indian Administrative Service officer, basically the high priests in India who control everything. Your maybe Indian Police Service, which controls the intelligence and central police forces, central armed police forces, and the military, and the diplomacy. Let's not forget that, because as Clausewitz said, what is war? War is nothing but diplomacy through violent means. Have to work together.
Absolutely,
correct?
Absolutely.
So that is precisely what you mean.
Yeah. So
but how do we achieve that given the fractured nature of India?
See, I think what we have to do, that we need to first have a debate at the parliament. That as far as our core interests are concerned, we have to work across the political spectrum.
So first, as a people, we develop some consensus as to what is national interest.
Absolutely.
What are our national interests?
What are core national interests?
What are our core national interests?
National interests. And concurrently, certain reforms have to take place in our national security decision matrix. For example, there is this cabinet committee on security.
Exactly.
The service chiefs are invited on need basis, right? So they have to be.
That is ridiculous. I mean frankly, that हास्यास्पद है हिंदी में कहूँगा, मजाक है. To translate in English, it is a joke, because you cannot oust the military chiefs, the service chiefs, from that committee. They must have direct exposure to the political bosses.
So the dialogue, regular dialogue between the political authority and the military authority, it should be a new kind of a thing, like what
Let me,
happened during Kargil
let me
crisis.
push further. You look at US politics, you look at British politics, you look at French politics. So many former generals went on to be leaders of the country. Do you think we need more military leaders in politics and in decision making?
Well, I would say that, look, firstly, whatever were decided by Kargil Review Committee, they came out with path-breaking kind of reforms. There was Naresh Chandra Committee. Subsequently, we had Ketkar Committee. They've given some very good suggestions, but those suggestions are implemented in a half-baked manner. I think it's high time we look at the new geopolitical and strategic security realities of India and create a new kind of a architecture which takes a 360-degree view of the entire strategic environment. We revisit our assumptions, we discard our mental maps and group thinking and see which is this new generation warfare, multi-domain warfare, hybrid warfare, how is it manifesting, which are the main stakeholders, how do you sort of remove these stakeholders from the silos and the linear thinking, and so that you have
Got
a
it.
360-degree view.
So that the IFS is not just talking to IFS officers, it's not a caste. It
Yeah.
actually, and the army is not just talking to the army, and the Air Force is not just talking to Air Force, and so on and so forth, that we become more than the sum of our parts.
Yes.
But on that note, you talked about new threats. We have threats. Look at Nepal. That has slipped away from the Indian arc of influence. Let's look at Bangladesh. That's a mess. And we did not see it coming. That's even worse. Maldives. Well, we can see what's happening in Maldives. Sri Lanka, well, at the moment it's fairly friendly to India, but you never know about tomorrow. We've seen that the Chinese now have Hambantota. So in many ways, the Chinese have locked us in through a string of pearls, and we have lost control of our own near neighborhood.
So this is the point that I'm saying, that you see, India's strategic geography is such that we can't change our neighbors. We are an anchor as far as South Asia is concerned. But we should have been seeing writing on the wall. The intelligence assessments, the diplomatic assessments, they should be seen with an open mind and take preemptive actions to see the situation doesn't get out of control. I think we have to go back to the drawing board, revisit our neighborhood first policy, and have some innovative ways of engagement. And it should not be security centric today. I think what is more important is that how we become a hub of regional economic integration. How do you work? How do you respect the sentiments of those people? How do you deal with the new realities? As far as Indian Ocean region is concerned, China is making incremental gains, be it in the form of China-Pakistan economic corridor, China-Nepal economic corridor, China-Myanmar economic corridor, maritime Silk Route. But we have an advantage of geographic proximity. So where we should invest is in how do you harness the blue economy of this region. Then another area where India can really make a good inroad is that when we talk about India is a preferred net security partner, it is not so much in terms of military parlance, but it's more in terms of what you call is the non-traditional security threats. Your tsunami, your disasters, your pandemic, yeah, any other such kind of situations, and even to deal with terrorism. These are the strides which India should do, and do not expect reciprocity in every affair. We are a big country. We have to be large-hearted. They are small countries, so there should be an element of generosity in us, and we should be giving more than what we should be expecting. So our social media also actually need to be extremely mindful. Some diplomatic tussles do take place between the two countries. But when the social media, which is doctrinally or ideologically driven, it gets hyper, it creates a breach between people to people.
I mean, look, social media is designed by algorithms to be divisive, to increase polarization. So only idiotic diplomats would use social media, and short-sighted pundits of national security would use social media. I think that we know very well from around the world. And I think what you are saying is India needs maturity. India needs deep thinking and long term strategic thinking and thinking outside the box, breaking down of silos to come up with a counter to what's going on.
See, today cognitive domain has become extremely important. What is important is what is that Indian narrative? What are the tools of strategic communication?
What is the India story?
The credibility of those tools. How do you sell that story to your own countrymen, to your neighbors, and to your world at large? For example, in Pakistan, though it's not a good example, they have Director General of ISPR, right? DG ISPR. You have the Public Works Department in China. All agencies, media agencies, social media agencies, they work under the rubric of these overarching organizations. In India, who is in control? Right? So you have Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, you have something in National Security, Council Secretary, each service is looking at its own kind of a narrative. We need a holistic national narrative, and all these agencies of the tools of propagation should work in tandem. Of course, without breathing down their neck or compromising on their autonomy. But we have to actually integrate, synergize, channelize. Then only this Indian story, Indian narrative will become more plausible. Otherwise, we're coming out to be a very fragmented, a very segmented kind of a society.
Brilliant. On that note, we'll be back to discuss more issues. We have great power balancing coming up next. Thank you very much, General Sharma, for your time.
Thank you.